Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to spend 45 minutes with us talking a little bit about Candy Kittens. Without further ado, I'm Andrew McClelland, consultant at IMRG and also the Data Project. Edward.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I'm Ed Williams. I'm one of the co-founders at Candy Kittens. I am the least well-known face at Candy Kittens, thankfully, and I'll leave that to this guy.
Hello, everyone. Jamie Laing. If you've seen a show called Main Chelsea, I apologize. I was on that for many years. I'm also the co-founder of Candy Kittens, a vegan confectionery brand. Everyone down there as well. There's so many faces. Hello, everyone down there.
Someone hiding down there. Guys, a little bit about the story about Candy Kittens. Which one of you wants to start?
OK, well, I can kick us off if you like. So Jamie and I met through mutual friends after we graduated from uni, all the way back in about 2011, 2012. And Jamie pitched this idea to me at the time to start a sweet shop. And his idea was slightly different to what we've ended up with. His idea was to sort of sell sweets in a new kind of sexy way. He told me that he wanted to be the mix between Hugh Hefner and Willy Wonka. I was sick in my mouth a little bit and then told him that was a terrible idea.
So wrong, couldn't it?
And we then evolved that over time. And really what it started was a sort of insight that the category could do better. How could we make better sweets, something that was more relevant to today's consumer? And sort of fast forward to 10, 11 years later, we're now the premium vegan confectionery brand in the UK, stocked in all major retailers, and sort of working hard behind the scenes to make sweets as good as they can possibly be.
Yeah, and I would almost go a little bit further than that. So my love for sweets sort of started very young. I was very young, I was very scared of the dark, and my brother used to tell me stories of Jamie and Sweet World to help me fall asleep at night. So I had this fascination made of sweets, a world made of sweets. Also, I was completely off the rails, ADHD, and so I wasn't allowed any sweets ever. So I wanted this world that was made of sweets that didn't make me hyper. Went to university, Leeds University. Anyone to Leeds University? Come on. Yes. I did theatre and performance. So when I arrived, my first year was contemporary dance. Honestly, it was the worst thing I've ever done, so I thought, this is a disaster. Quickly realized that I probably was quite unemployable, so I had to realize I had to probably do something for myself. Went to New York to go on a trip, came across a place called Dylan's Candy Bar. Ralph Lauren's daughter, Dylan Lauren, has this amazing sweet shop. Thought, this is incredible, this is going to be amazing, I want to replicate this, but in the UK. But as Ed said, a mixture between two terrible things. So that was the journey. Left university, had the option to go on a TV show called Made in Chelsea, saw that as a marketing platform to build the business at the same time, met Ed, as he said, and then we fell in love. And now we have Candy Kittens.
So convenience of timing, but where did the product come from? Where did the ideas for the product come to start with? Because surely you've got to have the product before you have the business.
Yeah.
Well, you'd think so, but not in our case. We actually ended up a slightly different route, where because Jamie, we were talking about this idea, originally it was a sweet shop. I said, why don't we make it a brand instead? One shop is fine, but why not have a product you can sell in lots of other people's shops? Perhaps that's more exciting. And then Jamie went on to this show, and the show at the time had kind of blown up. I think the producers, Jamie can maybe tell it slightly better, but probably didn't really believe Jamie, to be honest, that this was going to be a real business. So they weren't too protective of how much he could mention it on the show, and Ofcom had no idea what was going on at that time. So we went crazy on talking about Candy Kittens on a national TV show. And then before we knew it, we had 50,000 followers on Twitter, this is before Instagram, and no logo. We had a brand name, which was Candy Kittens. We had no product, no website, no idea what we were going to do. So we launched a very, very basic website. If anybody remembers Big Cartel, that's what we were using at the time. And we said, OK, we're going to launch this site. What are we going to do? And the night before, I said, well, if all these people are going to come on the site, we may as well have a product. We decided to mock up a T-shirt on Photoshop, white T-shirt that said, I'm a Candy Kitten on the front. The first night the website launched, we sold 20,000 of those T-shirts. And then that's what went on to fund the business. And then we took about 2 years before we had the first suite. Lots of other products in the meantime. But we were very much a brand and idea first, product second.
Yeah, and I suppose also it creates sort of the importance of a brand, right? You know, for example, loads of people, when you're sort of setting up a brand or a company, you're always quite scared to talk about your product, what you're doing. You think other people are going to steal it or whatever it is. But actually, I think there's a huge benefit in always having that conversation. Even if you actually haven't launched anything, constantly having that communication with people, your consumer, whatever it is, vital. You know, to the point where, as Ed said, I was doing this TV show called Made in Chelsea, and they said, hey, we want you to get a tattoo. I thought, great, I'll get a tattoo on the show, but can I get my logo tattooed on my hip? So Ed and I created a logo. I got it tattooed on my hip. The logo's now totally changed, so I just have a random cat on my hip, which isn't great. But the point was is that we made this conversation. We started having this, you know, this discussion. And so we then went and launched our first pop-up shop on in sort of the Chelsea area, because we we're going to do it like that. And no one knew what to expect, but we had a queue of people outside because we had created this brand, this ghost. And I think it's the real importance of just constantly having that discussion, never holding back, always talking about it.
So that shop, that pop-up shop, was that T-shirts or was that your first foray into sweets?
Wasn't sweets yet? Nope,
No
still don't have
sweets.
sweets.
So we always talk about that. We launched a sweet shop without any sweets, which was pretty either a masterstroke or complete stupidity. You can be the judge. But we sold everything, anything you could put a logo on. We had Candy Kittens T-shirts, pencil cases, pajamas, notebooks, all sorts of stuff, right? I mean, there was everything in that shop apart from sweets.
Yeah, but the point was is that when we first started making our sweets, you know, try and Google how to make sweets, nothing comes up. So, I mean, it's just, so you're like, okay, we're 21, 22 years old, we're setting up this company. Also, there's a sort of grand idea that, you know, I'm a son of a billionaire. I mean, I wish that was true. I haven't seen any of that money ever. And so people think that we started Candy Kittens with these huge fortunes. We started with £3,000 and no help from our family. They didn't believe it was going to work. I was on this ridiculous television show. And so we launched the pop-up shop with the sale of these first T-shirts and jumpers and things like that. And, you know, to create the actual product, Ed had to, because I wasn't with him, had to fly out to Germany to a sweet convention. He then had to go and talk to numerous different manufacturers about, hey, can you make our sweets? Can you make our sweets? And people literally laughed us out of the room. It's like going to Tesla and saying, I have an idea for an electric car. Will you make it for me? They're like, well, no, what are you talking about? So we had to sort of build trust and build kind of, you know, a real loyalty with different people. We met this manufacturer, a Spanish brand called Vidal. They actually liked the TV show, kind of, and they kind of knew people. They said, okay, we'll help you out. And that was the beginning. So our sweets at the beginning were, can I say this? They were terrible. They were really not good at the beginning. But it was just about brand and building it up.
So I've just spent 25 minutes in a conference centre down just across the hall here talking about the importance of brand and staying true to the brand. And actually, you guys have just blown that completely out the water because you've started in one place and you're on a journey to somewhere else. How do you manage that expectation from your big audience and keep it back into that business context? Because you could go in all sorts of different directions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I mean, it's the importance of brand, right? Well, I sent this, maybe you saw, I sent this thing to Ed recently, which I saw some guy talking about brand. And he said, you know, if Nike was to go and create a hotel, you would know exactly what the hotel is. You wouldn't have, you just know what it would be in it, right? You know it because it's the power of a brand. So with us, with Candy Kittens, we knew what it had to be. It had to be fun, exciting, young, all these different things. And what we had done sort of by accident with naivety, and actually we always said naivety is one of your biggest weapons you can have. Totally think it is that we were so naive that we had taken our audience on this journey without knowing how important, like, story and relating the story and all this stuff. We had taken everyone on the story. So when we had launched Candy Kittens, people already felt connected to it. And we had to stay true to that. So we had to make everything from packaging to taste to colors to branding to marketing, everything fun and exciting to keep it that way. But most of it was honestly down to naivety. We just thought, okay, this is what we should be doing.
And I think it was from the very beginning, when we knew we were going to be playing in sweets, we knew we had to go in a different direction to everything that was on the shelf. The only reason that we wanted to get into sweets really was because we felt that everything that was out there was super boring, dusty and old. So actually, it then becomes quite easy. If you've got an enemy, and in our case that's Haribo, you can then go, okay, well, if Haribo are doing it, we're going to do the opposite thing.
Did they say no to producing your sweets originally?
No, they didn't. No, there's no spite. They're just the sort of flagship enemy that we like to go after.
But our manufacturers now did say no.
They did, yeah. The guys who make the sweets today said no about 17 times before they said yes. Yeah.
So do you think so you've mentioned about being young and innovative, and how are you going to retain that as you grow as a business, as an organisation? You could lose some of that authenticity.
Yeah.
How are you going to retain some of that?
Jamie already thinks he's Peter Pan and he's never going to grow up. So that's one of our kind of
100%.
secret weapons.
It's honestly a trick. Don't grow up.
But I guess for us, it is a tricky balance, because now as we get the business grows, we're bringing in more experience and people that have been at bigger businesses and done bigger and better things than we've done before. And whilst that's great, we've got to fight really, really hard to keep that kind of innocence and naivety that Jamie talked about being our superpower when we started. So working really, really hard. Somebody I was speaking to the other day said that your job as founder in a brand is to keep the salt and pepper in the middle of the table.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of quite a nice analogy for us, is that we have to constantly make sure that in whatever those conversations are, that Candy Kittens salt and pepper stays firmly in the middle of the table, and we don't lose sight of perhaps why we started, or why we can challenge that category, why we can do something different. So yeah, we don't do an awful lot of work, Jamie and I. We just tell people, how to do it the Candy Kittens way.
We do a lot of work, Edward. But there's a couple of things I also think, which is, I mean, they're kind of analogies, but I think they're sort of quite useful, is that we always try to stay consistent. And so one of the things Ed said to me recently is that a friend of Ed's had this saying, and he actually set up a company with it, was, does it make the boat go faster? This was his kind of saying, right, that he used to do. So he would row in the boat, and when he would leave the boat, his friends would say, right, we're going to go for some beers. And in his head, he'd say, well, does it make the boat go faster? Is it good for me? And he went, no, well, I'm not going to go for a beer. He would then look at different jumpers and different things and think okay, if I wear this wet, sodden, heavy jersey, is that going to make the boat go faster? It's not, so I'm not going to do it. And Ed kind of told us this whole point, saying, well, does it make the boat go faster? So with Candy Kittens, whatever we do, we think, well, does it make the boat go faster? Is it good for us? And there are lots of reasons, especially when setting up a business, that you can jump at opportunities the whole time. We're a premium brand, that's what we're seen as, and we had Primark offering us, huge amounts of, they wanted to take a huge amount of units, but we had to say no because it didn't make the boat go faster. And I think that's really important at the beginning of the brand, to stay consistent the entire time and really know what your brand is and where you're heading, and also know your destination. I think that keeps the consistency.
But on the journey that you've already been on, that destination very obviously changes quite rapidly. Are you getting more of a concrete feel now for where you'd like to take the brand?
I think the destination does, to a certain extent, change. But what we've been really single-minded in from the very, very beginning is to knock Haribo off their perch. And we joke about that, and it is kind of sometimes a bit of a sort of figurehead of an enemy. But really, really, we didn't set out to sell some sweets at our local farmers market or sell some to the corner shop. That's nice for some, but for us, we really wanted to say, okay, we can be the #1 sweet at Tesco, and we're still doing everything we can to get there. I mean, the sort of horizons perhaps stretch and get a little bit further away. Perhaps we're driving towards that goal in a different car, or with more people in the car, or different things as you go. But the goal has not changed. Jamie has a saying about driving to Leeds, and it's his favourite one, so he's desperate to say it, so I'm going to let him get it out before we go any further.
I'm not desperate to say it, but okay, I'm okay. Well, I when I was doing this television show, I realized that I had to go and get a good agent, right? Because I was just a reality star, and they were pretty frowned upon, just reality stars. So I went to a huge agency which was called James Grant. It's now YMU, right? And they looked after Holly Willoughby, Anton Deck, all these big presenters. And I spoke to the founder, a guy called Paul, and he took me onto the roof, and he said, look, Jamie, and I asked for advice. That's what I was asking for. And he said, look, Jamie, I know you're here to be signed by us, but we can't sign you. You're a reality star. We don't know what you're going to do. We don't know where you're going to go, anything like that. So if I give you one piece of advice, if you're driving back to Leeds University, stay on that path. Don't veer off to Manchester. You'll get lost. And I remembered that. I said, okay, fine, so know your destination. And your point is, you've changed it and pivoted. We actually haven't. We're still a confectionery company. We still sell sweets which we want to make the best quality. We always want to make them different. We always want to make them sexy, fun, exciting. And we always wanted to knock Haribo off the perch. We've always known our destination. Yes, things have changed throughout. And actually, with that story, I'm now signed by that agency 10 years later. It's because that path I always stayed on. I think you have to, as soon as you know where you want to go, you can then start at the beginning. And I also think it's the same in sort of when you go into work. I think actually a lot of people try and find out what they want to do. And actually the better option is to find out what you actually don't want to do. And once you find out that, you can then sort of start at the beginning, I think.
And do you think that path has got boundaries? So a huge amount of your your brand awareness is due to social profile or the other activities you do. How do you keep the brand true to that path, or do you make sure that the other activities you do are supporting that brand?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the brand has evolved over time in many different ways. But ultimately, I think it comes back to we want to premiumize confectionery. We recently became a B Corp, which means that we're sort of doing everything we can to be the best for people and planet. So you sort of bolt on these extra bits, but with this fundamental foundation, I guess, which is make sweets better. And that's quite a broad term, sometimes perhaps a little bit too broad for some, but that can apply to anything then. So we're making it a better team, we're making it a better brand, we're making better packaging, we're making a better recipe, we're now making a better company through B Corp. And I think really just hammering away at that has been then what's kept us true to the core. Every little bit is that sort of incremental better step. I think that helps us get there.
And personally, how do you think you guys have changed? Because at the same time, you've had to develop a whole bunch of new skills, recruiting teams, managing teams, strategy, development. How have you adapted yourselves to fit with that?
Jamie and I don't speak anymore, so that's the first thing. No, but I think we've changed a lot. Every year in this business has been like running a totally different company. And we've had to learn lots and lots of things. Jamie and I came into this sort of super inspired and with all these kind of mad creative ideas to come in and change an industry, super, super impatient. And we quite quickly learned that we had to be a lot more patient. And we're nowhere near where we wanted to go 11 years in, which is good and bad, and you've got to get to peace with that. We also didn't really come into this as managers or people that were in any way leaders. And I think that's probably the biggest and definitely for me personally, the hardest adjustment is being a good leader and working with people to kind of put your vision in their minds and get them to contribute to that. So yeah, that's been hard. I mean, what would you say?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing for everyone in here who owns a brand as part of a brand. I think that's the hardest thing to sort of grasp is that when you start out, we're 21, 22 years old, we had this dream to make sweets. I always thought that you just go and make sweets and that's fun, you sell them, you make money, then that's it, you move on. And I didn't realize that all these things happen in terms of, cash flow, reading P&Ls. I didn't know the difference between net and gross when I was like, what the hell's that? I have no idea. Actually, this is a true story. I went for a job interview at a broking firm when I was about 19 to do an internship, and I thought the footsie was a game you played under the table. Honestly, so all these things you have to learn. I think the hardest thing to grasp is management. I think, looking after a team and understanding their needs, their desires, making a great culture. That is the really hard thing. And culture is such a big word now, but it's so important. And also understanding that actually you have to be more than just a company now. We've become a B Corp recently. So and all of those things actually allow us to speak more openly about different things and important things. And for consumers, especially the younger consumers, it's so important to have much more of a purpose than just selling sweets.
So you've got to be honest to your customer. You've got to be true to what you've told them you're going to be. That's what you're going to be. But again, as things develop, how do you move them on that journey with you? Is that where those social channels give you the opportunity to effectively have a two-way conversation? Yeah,
that's a great point. I definitely, so authenticity is everything, right? It has to be completely, you look at it in social media, right? If anyone who wants to sort of grasp like social media in a good way, if you are making a TikTok and an Instagram video, the way that you make it super popular is you say at the bottom, this is a fact about a bell. And in the first 3 seconds, you mention a bell. You talk about authenticity, so you're getting them straight away. And I think for us, where we've been lucky in many ways, but unlucky in lots of ways, right? But the lucky way that we had is that because I was talking about it on this television show and I was seen as this sort of rogue, younger guy, actually people accepted what the brand was like at the beginning. It was maybe a bit sloppy in places, but it was good. The sweets were great, okay, but not amazing. And actually, we've taken them on that journey. So as ourselves, we've become maybe better managers or understanding brand better, understanding packaging or e-commerce or whatever it is. So has the brand developed. And actually, that's how you develop. And you constantly have that communication through social channels. We are lucky that we have a big social following and things like that. But actually, if we talk about that, that was also a major negative. you know, you go to the likes of Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Tesco's, doesn't matter if you are the king of England, it doesn't matter one bit. They have to know that you have longevity. And for us, they thought we had no longevity whatsoever. They thought that I was going to be pictured doing something stupid or something was going to happen and the brand was going to die. So then how do you separate the brand? Because I was the brand, but so how do you do that? So it's really hard, but those are the hurdles you have to jump past. So actually, social channels is a great way to do it. We always have to be careful with it.
And how do you, as much as social channels are popular, there's a whole chunk of your potential UK audience that don't engage. How are you reaching out to those customers?
I think it's tricky. I mean, we talk about kind of in FMCG world, people talk about mental availability and physical availability. And the mental availability is that recall. So when you're thinking about sweets, you think about Candy Kittens. And that is definitely the stuff that we achieve through social media, through our website, through engaging with people online, and hopefully being the kind of most fun, interesting, relevant brand to do that with, I guess. And then the physical availability is when you think about going to buy sweets, Candy Kittens are there in front of you. So distribution for us is a huge part of that, and this year we've grown our distribution quite considerably across the UK. We have a goal to be available in every single postcode in the UK, and we're sort of about 75, 80% there at the moment. So hopefully when the next time you're thinking about sweets, Candy Kittens won't be too far away from you, and I guess that's how we try and do that. But going back to the social media point, I think people in sort of startups talk a lot about this idea of kind of building the plane as you're flying it, and we're absolutely doing that. And a lot of those mistakes and a lot of those things where we're testing ideas, maybe it's testing new flavors, testing new products, all of that happens completely in public and in front of people. And I think that's also quite a new thing in food and drink brands. You know, your big giants that dominate the supermarket shelves typically don't do that stuff. It's all very secret and behind closed doors, and then something gets launched right at the last minute. For us, we're just sort of bringing people in on the journey, developing as we go. We had shops with no sweets. Everybody that came down asked us why and talked about that. And then when the sweets launched, they're there ready to buy them, and those sort of mental and physical availability then hopefully line up quite nicely.
But also, I suppose your question is about marketing, right? Like, you know, I think for us, one of the big things that we've learned is collaborations. We've done some amazing collaborations, and you know, we're a confectionery brand, so we're known as an impulse buy typically. You walk into a supermarket, you buy your eggs, your bacon, whatever it is, and then you go, oh, I'm going to buy a packet of sweets, and you take it with you. And that's with a lot of different brands. So what we do is we position ourselves in different places. So we did an amazing collaboration with Brewdog, the beer brand. You know, you don't see confectionery with beer, so you put them together, the audience sees it, so therefore a new audience starts buying you. So we do that the whole time, and I really encourage people with a brand to start doing collaborations. But again, we got given this great bit of knowledge by an amazing guy, and I say this a lot, by a guy called Rory Sutherland, and I'm sure a lot of you know him. He said to us, you should never follow logic. We went, what do you mean? He said, well, if you're flying a plane or driving a car, following logic is a good thing because it gets you back in the same place as everybody else, a safe place. If you're setting up a brand and running a business, never follow logic because it gets you back in the same place as everybody else, a place where you don't want to be. So when we collaborate, we only collaborate with things completely different to what we're doing, which I think is so important. And also, you know, we have to make an emotional connection to our consumer. So the fact that we're vegan, we're B Corp, we're as recyclable as we possibly can, we're the best made sweet out there. So when someone comes to buy a sweet and they look at all the sweet range, they see Haribo, all these different things, but they see the vegan mark, the B Corp mark, all these things on our packaging, they automatically go to it. There's more emotional connection towards it. So creating that emotional connection with your consumer is vitally important.
And actually that feeds into the question that I was going to ask you next was, you know, there is an element where novelty is, you know, that first sale. You know, the first time I buy from you, it's the novelty. How do you then, or what are you looking at to then increase that repeat purchase cycle?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point, and I think one that's super close to us, because in the early days, we were obsessed with this idea that people will buy the sweets once because of this guy, and maybe not buy them again. So we knew we had to get that product right. There was a competitor that launched at a similar time by sheer coincidence. It was Maria Sharapova launched a range of sweets. It was called Sugar Pova, which was absolute genius name, fantastic, really nice branding. But they just repacked those bags with pick and mix, basically. So you'd buy it because of the name and Maria and all of that stuff around it. But then it was a bit of a letdown inside. And when we knew we couldn't repeat that. So I guess that's what led us to being so sort of quality focused, so obsessed with the idea then of how do you make the best possible thing. That's what led us to vegan, not because we're vegans ourselves, but actually on the realization that in your gummy bears there's loads of meat, skin and bones, that's just a bit gross and grim. Can we have sweets without that? Yes, we can do it and we can do it well. Okay, we'll do that. And I think that that's a never-ending cycle. We're never quite happy and it's never finished, but really, really making sure the product lives up to sort of how it looks on the outside, I guess. It's got to be as good as it looks.
Yeah, and just never cutting corners. I think the tendency when you're setting up a brand is to probably cut corners in certain ways. Maybe it's the photography, or it's really small things. Maybe it's hiring someone who is, I don't know, not as experienced because they're less expensive. Whatever. But I think actually never cutting corners, we never did that. For whatever reason, we just didn't. And I think that also encourages the consumer to keep buying, because when they buy it, they feel it, they touch it, they're like, oh no, this is great, I like this. And so you've got to create a love brand, right? So if you go into the car phone warehouse when it used to be there, and you've always bought an Apple phone, how do you persuade someone to buy a Samsung phone? You have to just make it in some ways better or different. So you have to try and persuade people once they have that first bite, that first touch, that it's better than other brands. And I think especially with FMCG, it's an emotional connection.
And in my head, I've already got this idea of Candy Kittens as having like a soft, fluffy exterior and increasingly a harder, more commercial centre. How do you get those that are in that experience that you need in that hard commercial centre to reflect the brand in everything they do as they expand, whether it's finance, whether it's production, people that aren't necessarily connected directly with your end user or your end customer, or perhaps even the ethos of the brand? How do you build that within the organisation? Because surely then that reflects back out to the customer at the end.
Well, it's funny. I think for us, it goes almost right back to day one, where we looked at the confectionery shelves, sort of stood in a Waitrose and looked at it and went, isn't this lot pretty boring? Can't we do a better job? And the people, funnily enough, who work for those companies often think the same thing. So we go and speak to those, we pull them in and they work for us. And they just have an interest in doing things differently. And I guess that's exactly in line with Jamie and I. They may want to do things differently in areas that perhaps Jamie and I aren't experts in, whether that's building a P&L slightly differently to how you build it somewhere else, or running a warehouse in a different way, or whatever it may be. But I think there's that common thread amongst our team, whilst we're all very different, to want to do great work and want to challenge and just improve the world around them. And that's something that we've probably instilled from the beginning and definitely sets us apart. We're just on this constant mission. We have a big banner that sort of is on the wall above our desk in the office. It says, better is possible. And I think it's that idea that we're never done. We're always, always striving to do something different and better.
Yeah, and I think also straight away is just completely losing ego and having complete self-awareness. I encourage any business owners or people building brand to just go and get some therapy, honestly, because you start to learn about yourself so much more. And actually, the best way it's all about team, right? So the best way to build a successful business is to hire people better than you in every single way. And so actually, Ed and I are great at some things, and we're not great at a lot of things. So just getting people in who are better than you at other things, and also understanding that you have to let things go. And typical founders are quite control freaks. I know I am a bit of a control freak, but you have to let that go.
And how hard is that for you?
Oh my God, it's a nightmare. It's a yeah, I'm not good at it at all. Especially with the sort of social media side, I just think I know it best. And that's troubling sometimes, because I find it very hard to let that go.
And is that, I guess, some of the, reflecting on one of your points earlier, that's some of the things that the big brands, the Sainsbury's of this world, are worried about. They're not sure where you might take the company on that social media journey.
Yeah, but isn't that way more exciting? Like, the reason why we watch live television still, and people still listen to radio and stuff like that, is the element of something could go wrong. Right? The reason why we watch Formula One is because it's something fun, but also there's that element of, like, something can happen. Right? That's what you want within a brand. I kind of think you do. You kind of live on the edge. And I think with Candy Kittens, anything can kind of happen because I'm the co-founder. So I think that's a good thing.
I vouch for that.
And how do those grocers take that perspective?
I think it's quite fun for them as well, right? When we went to our very first Tesco meeting, you kind of lined up all these guys in the cheap suits and wheelie suitcases with laminated catalogues of products. And we walk in and start talking really passionately about changing the category and selling bags of sweets for £3.50, which kind of blew their minds. And I think it's just asking the stupid questions sometimes and being a bit of a breath of fresh air in a place where everybody is pretty dull, in my experience.
And does everything the same way all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very predictable. They all go in and talk about the same numbers, the same spreadsheets, the same stuff. And where's the fun in that, right? We're all humans at the end of the day, and I think that's something that we kind of can quite easily forget in business. Everybody's got stuff going on at home, everyone's got a partner, everyone's got children, whatever it may be. And really, we just want to have fun, don't we?
And that was something that we were talking about in another theatre earlier, is we often forget that we're customers ourselves. We always talk about customer in the third person. Whereas actually, what would we expect from that experience, from that brand?
100%. And the guys who you are in meetings with, wherever it may be, are also consumers of our product, right? So we might not win that big deal, but we might have won over one customer.
Yeah. And also, I think we all had this moment. Did anyone have this moment where suddenly you realized that your parents weren't right? And you were like, what? That's just, my mum wasn't right? You kidding me? You have to remember that we all are like that. So everyone in some way is guessing the entire time. And I think, as Ed said, I think whatever you're doing in any brand is that creating that element of fun for people to sort of have an escapism from a day. It's a really great thing to do. Doesn't matter what position, and we are all humans. All of us.
So coming back to the human element again, and back to those social channels, how do you rely on them for new product innovation and new direction? How do you then go through and filter out the good from the bad, the ones that are worth trying, the ones that you kick into touch and move on?
A bit of both, I think, yeah. A bit of both.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things that you never get anything right, and you just keep testing and trying. I think, especially with social media channels, if we want to focus on that, right, it's very easy to be precious over these things. But actually, I think sometimes more is better. Just pump it out there, try different things the entire time, and don't be precious. And actually, it's a great place to just continue that conversation all the time. I think that, if you want to be successful online, and especially with sort of social media channels, you have to make it entertaining or interesting. That's one of the things you've got to do. You've got to be honest, as we said before, and you've got to be honest from the very beginning. So I just cannot encourage people enough that if you are going to create a video about your product, whatever it is, and you want to say something about it, say it in the first 3 seconds, and then do the rest of the explaining later. Just have it from the very beginning. As soon as you do that, the consumer, the person who's watching it, is straight away in because they believe it. They need to believe it because there's a whole bunch of shit out there. So you want to cut through the bullshit and get straight to the point straight away.
So you need that initial hook, and then you can expand the conversation.
Initial hook. And they talk about these things like, the first 3 seconds have to be engaging. I don't know. You have to, maybe if you're naked at the top, that would probably work, right? But not everyone's going to do that. But just be honest from the start. Whatever you're talking about, if you're talking about planting trees, and the title is, or the comment is, or whatever it is, says, this is how you plant a tree. At the very top, say, so this is how you plant a tree. Talk about it, and then explain it later. Be honest from the start.
Now, of course, the idea of the social channel, in more traditional terms, is actually we need to sell more stuff to more people. How do you bring that back to your business? How do you then generate traffic? How do you then drive people to the website, to the transaction, to the handing over some money?
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of that kind of storytelling stuff that Jamie talked about. What we would try and do typically is talk about a product as it's being developed, as we're working along. We're having a lot of success more recently with emails in plain text that just go out and talk from my perspective or Jamie's perspective about an idea. We've been working really hard on this thing. We wanted you to see it first. Less, I think, sort of traditional sales and sort of all bells and whistles kind of marketing stuff, and more just really talk on a level to that person. So we're trying to do more and more of that, and that seems to be working quite well for us. I guess one of the other challenges we've had since growing our kind of retail distribution so much is that Candy Kittens are now very available in hopefully your local store, so you don't have to buy them online. So we've had a new challenge there to how do we reignite the e-commerce channel for Candy Kittens. At the early days, it was easy because we had nobody else sold them. It was only us. If you wanted them, you had to come to us. So now we're trying to reignite that, and we're doing things that make that a bit more special. So whether it's the Brewdog collaboration, or we've recently collaborated with Netflix, looking to reach out into other circles, I suppose, to kind of bring those extra tertiary kind of consumers in.
Yeah, but also I think Ed actually told me there's a sort of technique which people may know called the jab, 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 hook technique, which is, the problem is what we always try and do, we're always selling, right? So if you're constantly selling to someone, people are getting bored. We're being sold all the time. So actually you don't really want to be sold. You want to be sold in a smart way. So you always want to give, 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 and then take, and your take is your hook. And we did something quite smart recently, which it was very smart, but we weren't set up for it, is we sent out a fake email that I had sent. And we sent it to our email database saying, hey, I'm getting my wife Sophie a present. Is the discount code still working, Sophie50? And we sent it out to absolutely everyone. And so everyone then thought that this discount code was out. So we created the discount code. We had, I mean, how many orders did we have?
I mean, we did about 8 months revenue in 24 hours on our website. The problem was we didn't think it was going to be as successful as that. So that was a good and bad. We then took about 3 weeks to kind of unwind the customer services,
supply chain issues,
supply chain, and different bits and pieces. So it was, yeah, it was fun.
But the point is, it's selling to someone without realizing they're being sold to. And I think that's the key with these situations, is that you don't want to be sold to. You really don't, I don't think. You almost want to do it in a smart, funny, interesting, intelligent, story way.
And in fact, then it's not about a sales decision that the customer's making.
They're deciding to buy that because they've already bought into the brand, or they've already bought into the people behind it, or the story, whatever it may be. But yeah, put it in a position where they can make the choice.
Although next time, make sure that production know that that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of sorries.
And how do you, those customers that you're talking about, you've probably got a relationship with them because you've emailed that message out to them. How do you then keep that ongoing relationship going? Because surely that, again, we come back to, yes, there's a bit of a novelty factor, but have you guys thought about things like subscriptions? So you've got that repeat process, or how can you increase that engagement with them that effectively ensures they're buying more product?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've toyed with the idea of subscriptions a few times, and we haven't quite nailed it still. We're about to try something again. Somebody told us that subscriptions work really well for products you need, toilet roll, don't work very well for products you want. And I think that's probably quite true, but we're still plugging away to see if we can kind of tap into that subscription gold mine at some point. I guess in terms of keeping people engaged, there's various things in terms of our packaging and the product itself, so how that arrives with people. We try and encourage some kind of entertainment in the home, I guess, with that, so whatever's included in the box. Perhaps there's a little newspaper that's got our latest news in there, or something about a kind of free, unexpected gift, or whatever that may be. We also do a lot now with email where we're trying to flip not from just sales emails that sell product, but also emails that just inform and update generally on the kind of wider Candy Kittens lifestyle. So talking about the things that we think appeal to the Candy Kittens audience. So maybe that's, I don't know, London Fashion Week last week or the week before. We might talk about our hot take on London Fashion Week, what we thought of certain shows or whatever it may be, just to kind of keep that interesting thing. And I think that's the email that stops you from unsubscribing. When you get the third sales push with the third discount offer in a row, that's when you search for that unsubscribe button. But when you've got something flooding through, there's a little bit interesting, informative, and kind of feels good, that keeps you hooked for a little bit longer, hopefully.
And so, Jamie, on how do you keep that balance between wanting to have that broad engagement with that social audience, with actually, at the back of your mind, you're also wanting them to engage with Candy Kittens and buy more product?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Because you want that sort of mass audience, but also to keep engaging. I mean, I'm sort of old school. I think it's all down to sort of customer service as well. I think that's a really important thing. And actually, we don't focus enough time on customer service. And at Candy Kittens, we're just so about it all the time. You know, there's sort of massive like data that you can see with like hotels, for example. You know, when you go to a hotel and it's a sliding door just with glass, actually people don't really remember it that well. That's why you have people standing outside, dressed smart, opening the doors. Yes, it's more expensive in different areas, but actually it's far more rewarding and memorable. So actually focusing, putting it out there, social media, doing all that marketing, but actually when they come to buying the product or whatever it is, having that just 10 out of 10 customer experience is so important, that sort of easy step-by-step process. And we try and do that every single day. We work on it every single day. And I think so many brands forget about that. The customer service is everything.
And you're moving it away from being a price discussion to being an experience discussion.
Completely, it's all about the experience. Customer phones up, they have a problem with the delivery, or they want to change something, or they want to add something, and it's swift and easy and amazing. It works. That's why Amazon is so good, because the customer service is unbelievable. It's amazing. You get sent a product typically that you don't like or it's a mistake, you can send it back, no questions asked. It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what you should integrate within your business.
But that's transactional, whereas you're wanting a little bit more engagement
Yeah.
whilst retaining that.
Yeah, I think
that
the aim
service
has got to be that the product is so good that you forget how much you paid for it, because that's not even a question. And I think we've probably all been to restaurants where you go, it's this big hyped up restaurant, and you go in and you leave thinking, oh, that was a bit expensive, or that was a bit of a rip-off. And then you've probably been to other restaurants, and maybe they're even the most expensive meal you've ever had, but you don't even think about how much you paid, because the service and the food and the experience and everything was just spot on and so good. And I think that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for that thing that is so good that you just don't even think about the price.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at the timer. We've got about just over a minute left.
Do we hold our breath?
Make it count.
Hold your breath. Or each of you could just say, where do you think Candy Kittens is going next?
Where is Candy Kittens going next? I mean, for us, with any business, you want to reach the heights of America and things like that. But actually, our main focus is the UK. We think that's important. We want to take over the UK to begin with and be the best confectionery business out there. We're the fastest growing confectionery business in the UK. And then in 5 to 10 years' time, we want to build it to the world. And actually, ours is all about building a generational brand. We don't see it as short term. We see it as completely long term.
Yeah, nicely said. I mean, I'll add to that we've just launched a campaign called No Nasties, All Good, and that's about trying to apply that to Candy Kittens, but also the wider category. So a real challenge to the industry around us that we think is pretty rubbish to do much better. So if we can make a sweet without gelatin, without carbon, without palm oil, what are you guys playing at? We're much smaller, with much less money, much less experience. If we can do it, why can't you?
Ed, you have 25 seconds.
With 25 seconds left, so I'll ask Jamie to sing us a little song. This is your initiation. Go.
No.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very, very
much for your
much.
time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.